Cheap seats at the back. Thanks very much. Right, welcome to the second of our Building Sustainable Communities events. It's an absolute pleasure to have those of you that came before back and all the new faces, and a particular welcome also to all of those who are currently sitting in our Red Roof Rugby Club event down in Cornwall, and also up in our Ross on Wye branch, where we're hosting 2 satellite events to make sure that we are talking to more than just the Somerset crowd. So, Building Sustainable Communities, designed to engage, inform and inspire the local communities, especially you guys that have chosen to sit here tonight and the audience online, around what the future of building looks like. And in the knowledge that we're all taking this slightly crazy journey at the moment, where there's lots going on, there's lots of change happening, and we're all kind of getting on that journey and understanding what it looks like. Before we get on to the main presenters, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about what we're doing at Bradford's. And I want to look at it from the perspective of, from the fulfillment end of what we do, that's looking after our customers and our communities, all the way up the supply chain to our manufacturers and suppliers who keep us in the products that you need. So when I look at the service and the support and the products that we deliver, I make no bones about the fact that one of our responsibilities is to make sure we act as a voice for the communities, our customers, our peers, and of course our own internal Bradford's team. So you no doubt will all have seen in the press lots and lots of bits and pieces around what's going on around nutrient neutrality into watercourses. And I'm very proud to stand here saying we're part of the group down here in Somerset that are championing what's going on to try and drive the behaviour in government to unlock the moratorium on planning that's going on. So that's part of our responsibility. And then, of course, we've got to make sure that we're helping you to build ready for the future. And that's where making sure that we have what you need and making sure that we've got a way for you to access that is important. I'm going to talk about that bit on the bottom left of the slide in a second. But it would be remiss of me not to talk about what we're doing at Bradford. So it's all very well us coming here and saying, hey, you need to build ready for the future, and you need to be putting in all these cool new products, and you need to be thinking about being net zero and all the rest of it. What are we doing? And how can I stand up here and justify that we can host this conference, kind of look you in a straight face and say, we're going in the right direction? And I'm going to keep it really high level this evening. So we kicked off in April our Sustainability ESG project. So that is to look at our strategy through the lens of sustainability, but more importantly, do it through a really robust and structured way to ensure that we're focusing on the right things and we're getting into the right position to make sure that Bradford's is truly practicing what it preaches. And I really look forward to sharing all the output of that with you as that develops. And for those of you in the crowd who are from Bradford's, sharing it with you guys as well, it's going to be a really important journey we all take. The other bit that's really crucial is our training, is getting our teams up to speed to understand what this future of building thing looks like. And so we've already worked with Cortexa, who support our trade federation and support us for our training academy, to pull together a sustainability program, and we're pulling loads more material from suppliers and from further afield to make sure that we've got a really comprehensive guide and information source for people to use. And I'll talk more about how important that information source is in a second. And then finally, looking to the top of the food chain, but up the supply chain, to what we're doing with our suppliers. So first and foremost, it's really important that we're able to look you in the eye and say our supply chain has integrity in the same way that our customers are going to ask for that as well. So we're working with our trade federation, working with peers, colleagues in the merchant industry to work out how best to ensure that we've got an industry standard around making sure that supply chain is transparent, has integrity, and is sustainable. The second bit then is more around how we're using those manufacturers and helping them by encouraging them to help us. So getting them, they are the deep experts. We're a builder's merchant, we're consciously generalists. We aggregate all the materials together to take them to a site so you can build a whole house. So it's about leaning on those specialists, our manufacturers, to give us that information so we can provide the best advice to our communities, to our customers. So I talked about what's our proposition, what do we offer at Bradford's? And we spent a lot of time talking about this, and we realized that the key actually was that our proposition remains very simple. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about selling products with a very sustainable angle to it, or whether we're talking about selling building products. It's all around offering great customer service. And our ability to do that in the sustainability sphere goes back to some of the stuff that I've already talked about. So, importantly, making sure we've got increasingly well-informed staff who can help our customers, our communities, make those informed decisions. That's an absolutely pivotal part of what we're trying to do. The second, and I've talked about us being generalists and the manufacturers being the experts, is about providing that conduit for expert information. So we had an awesome presentation from Chris, who you'll hear in a minute, and from Charlotte from Polypipe earlier, about green urbanisation and sustainable drainage. There's no way that Bradfords can have that level of knowledge across all the facets that we aim to deliver onto a site. So we lean on them, and I recommend to anyone from our customer base, from our community base, we've got this great support network who really know what they're talking about when it comes to the deep detail on systems. So really about leaning on that. We want to make sure we provide what you need, and there are two parts to this. One is making sure that we've got what you need and what you want as circumstances change, as regulations come online, and that comes from listening to you and listening to our manufacturers. Two things here. One is we know we're not across the whole of the Southwest. So when we say we want to be able to get you what you need, that's what we mean. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be that close to a Bradford. So we work really closely with all the members in our buying group and with the membership of the BMF. So one way or another, we'll be able to find the right person to give you the solution or the information that you need. The second thing about this is that there's a little bit of us that says we need to give you what you need, but actually there's a really important piece about driving into, presenting to you the stuff that's coming down the line. And there are a couple of suppliers upstairs tonight who I hope it will really inspire you as to the sorts of things that we're looking at that will help people build in line with regulations, in line with trying to reach net zero, in line with sustainable building. I've talked about having demonstrable integrity of our own supply chain. That's going to be really key to make sure that actually we're giving you great service. And then finally, making sure that actually we're not just talking about products and building projects, but actually we understand the context behind it. So making sure we can have really good conversations with you around the external factors that are driving the decisions that you're having to make or that perhaps we're helping you to make. So that's our proposition, and I hope that makes sense. Of course, none of tonight would be possible without our suppliers. So this is my opportunity to say thank you very much to those named on this slide, just to say thank you so much for supporting this and making it what it is. But as I said, we're the generalists, these guys are the experts, and I'm going to hand over to Chris in a minute to demonstrate that. So Chris, without further ado, over to you. So Chris, Head of Product Sustainability from Marshalls, key sponsor for this evening. If you welcome to the stage.
Okay, I've only got 10 minutes, and I normally talk about this for at least a week, so strap yourselves in, because I'm going to talk very fast indeed. I'm going to start just by talking you through a whistle-stop tour of our sustainability journey. And I always start with this slide for 3 reasons. First of all, it's to show off, because we've been doing this for a very long time. Sustainability has been core to our strategy for more than 20 years. It's cost a lot of money, and we've put a lot of time into it, so we're really proud of it, and I hope you're impressed. Secondly, it's to point out a lot of the logos on there. What we're keen to do is always align ourselves to the best methodologies and get external experts to validate our claims. So we're not marking our own homework. You can see there with the Carbon Trust, with the Science Based Targets Initiative, we've got external people validating our claims. Thirdly, though, and crucially, you'll see there's a lot about people on there. Any sensible sustainability strategy will put people at the heart of it. So the living wage, the fair tax, the modern slavery work that we do, that's why we're doing it all at the end of the day. So it's really important to bear that in mind. I haven't got time to talk about that today. I'm going to mainly talk about the environmental stuff. So understanding our environmental sustainability approach, it falls really clearly into 2 strands. First of all, mitigation, what we can do to reduce our harm on the planet and mitigate the worst effects of climate change, and adaptation, which is the acceptance that as the human race we didn't do enough 15, 20 years ago to turn back the tide. So what do we do to adapt the changing climate? There are a couple of things that we do with water conservation, placemaking that straddle those 2 areas, but think about your climate response in terms of what you're doing to mitigate and what you're doing to adapt. On the mitigation side, we've done loads of work internally. We've reduced our carbon footprint by 50% between 2018 and 2020. We've reduced loads of the cement, minimum of 40% of the cement that we use in our concrete blocks. So operationally, we've done a lot of work. Externally, though, we're helping our customers to make the right choices. We've published our carbon footprint since 2008. You can find those on the website. Those carbon footprints are calculated for us by the Carbon Trust. So as I say, we're not marking our own homework. There's some credibility in that. I've got a plea to make, though, while I'm here, while I've got your attention. When you're asking for this data, because Giles mentioned earlier, data is really important. When you're asking for this data, make sure you check the veracity of the data that you're getting. Ask for the footprint boundary is absolutely crucial. So who's measured the carbon footprint? What methodology have they used? And, for example, we've always quoted cradle-to-grave carbon footprints. That covers the whole life cycle of the product. Plenty of people measure cradle-to-gate carbon footprints, which is basically the manufacturing process up until it's ready to leave to go to site. Both are completely legitimate, but both will give you completely different numbers. So when you get the data, interrogate the data, make sure you're comparing apples for apples, and make sure make sure your customers are being credible about what they're sharing. On that note, though, because obviously there's a lack of consistency, a lack of standardization at the moment in the space, we've got great hopes that that's going to come in the form of EPDs. A lot of your suppliers will be presenting you with EPDs. We will be doing very soon, I can assure you. There's a big project underway to do that. But that makes it really easy to make like-for-like, apples-for-apples comparisons between different products. So look out for those. It sounds very onerous, though. A lot of the stuff that we do about mitigation, it costs us money, it takes time, it takes a lot of resource. There are opportunities, though, and just to give you one now that we can talk about, not a lot of people know that concrete sequesters carbon. It reabsorbs carbon over its lifetime. That's just a feature of the way it hardens, the way it cures. That presents us with an opportunity. If we can introduce excess carbon into our mix process or into our curing process, then first of all, that carbon isn't going into the atmosphere, so that's providing an environmental benefit. That's what we're here to do. But it also means that our products achieve strength faster, which means that we can get them onto your yards quicker, which means that our production efficiencies increase, so we can sort of make more money out of that. And say it quietly, we might even be able to charge other businesses for a carbon offsetting rule as well. So when you start getting into it, you can find that a lot of a lot of sustainability work, as well as being onerous, it can also provide you with opportunities as well. Onto the adaptation side then. This is a very quick whistle-stop tour of some of the themes that you might start seeing. We know that the climate's changing. One of the first sort of impacts is flooding. You see that down here more than a lot of other people, to be quite honest. What are some of the solutions? Soft suds, sustainable drainage systems, introducing green infrastructure into urban spaces in the form of rills, attenuation ponds, swales. You're going to see more and more of that. Your customers are going to be asking questions about it. The challenge for us is to come up with systems and products that make it easy for people to integrate those systems. The challenge for you is to understand what they are when people ask about them, and to come back to us and ask us for what they need. Other solutions, permeable paving. I've got to plug this. I've talked about nothing else for 10 years. Not all the solutions are new. So this is a brilliant way of managing surface water at source and providing a controlled flow of clean water. In addition, though, we have to accept, and I'm a sustainable drainage purist, we have to accept, though, that sometimes you're going to have to bury water underground in large tanks and pipes. What we talked about this afternoon was all about, in order to mitigate flood risk, we need to use the right tools in the right order at the right time. So it's not that one's better than the other, they just have to be used at the right time. So that's something that your customers are going to be asking about more and more. Another issue that's sort of thundering over the horizon is the fact that cities are going to get hotter, so they're going to be very uncomfortable to live in, to work and play and move around in. So what can we do about that? From our point of view, we need to understand better how our materials react under heat. How do they absorb heat? How do they hold on to heat? And how do they release heat over time? If we can give you data about that, you can help your customers to make the right material choices to design the urban heat island effect out of the spaces that they develop. That slide goes on for too long. Another solution is, surprise, surprise, introducing more green infrastructure. Trees provide canopy cover, they provide evapotranspiration, they provide biodiversity benefits, they provide air quality benefits. Introducing green infrastructure into urban spaces is not easy, though. So again, we've got to come up with the products and the systems that make it easy for you to integrate those. I think the point that I'd like to make is that I work for a hard landscaping manufacturer. We're the biggest in the UK, we sell a lot of concrete. And if I'm telling you that we need to start introducing soft landscaping, I think it's time to pay attention. that's as much as I wanted to go on about, and Giles didn't trust me that I'd keep to under 10 minutes, so I think I've won. When you're talking about products, there's 3 things they can do. Think about what it's made of and how it's made, but also think about what it does as well, and pass that on to your customers. So, having kept to under 10 minutes, I'm going to hand you over to Tomas Gaertner, who's an architect who specialises in commercial passive house projects. Thank you.
Right. Hi, everyone. Yeah, right. My name's Tom Gaertner. I'm an architect and passive house designer. I'm not a lecturer or scientist or researcher or anything like that. I'm a practicing architect. In our practice, we specialize in sustainable design. And we have been specializing in sustainable design for the last 15 years. We don't do anything else but passive house in our practice or similar high-performance standards. And our projects, they span from larger scale residential projects to offices, schools, higher education, and also, most recently, the new passive house swimming pool in Exeter that we've been involved with on this project as well. And that drives all our projects, which we focus on healthy, high-performance, human-centered design very much. And today, I will give you a sort of an idea what sustainability for us means, and what we mean by that when we talk about sustainability. Because there's also misperceptions in sustainability. Quite often, when we talk about sustainability, we focus far too much on the what we need to do. Energy, low carbon, resource efficiency. We rarely focus on the why we need to do that, because everyone feels that's obvious, because it is about environmental issues in general. So this is very much what today is about. It's more focusing on the why. I'll give you a quick overview of that, and then I'll show you how we apply that in one of our projects, which is actually a retrofit project for this as well. So when we talk about sustainable design, what is sustainable design? This one here, not sure if any one of you knows that, this one here, 2 years ago, was the most sustainable building in the world. I know, it doesn't quite give it away. Lots of glass on there. You're looking at the north elevation of that building. And the reason why this building became most sustainable building in the world with the highest BREEAM rating at the time was because it had an overheating problem, which they solved in a really clever way by coming up with a very clever ventilation commissioning system on that project and how to control that. Now, I would argue, if they would have used less glass on that building, they wouldn't have had an overheating problem, but it wouldn't have been the most sustainable building in the world in the first place. This one here is more obvious what it tries to achieve, obviously, in terms of insulation and in terms of energy efficiency and what it does to that. Now, is that sustainable design? Possibly in some actors, but not necessarily at all. And sustainable design is also about materials. Using regrowing, renewable materials, fast regrowing materials like wood, timber, cellulose, these kind of things, but also straw. And their buildings might out of straw, of course, on a small scale. There's a 5-story office building which opened its doors 2 years ago in Germany, which is entirely made of straw in the external walls. And it performs to passive house standard. The materials for that building has grown within a year. That is sustainability. When you look at a tree and you claim that's sustainable, a pine, a spruce, needs 40 to 70 years to grow to size that you can use it for construction timber. It takes quite a while for these timbers to regrow, and that needs to be considered as well, of course. And what's sustainable as well? A lot of sustainability is also about this one here. A lot about sustainability is about getting a t-shirt, getting a certificate, getting some reward for it. And that is important. Don't get me wrong. We do that a lot as well in terms of getting these certificates for our clients and getting the reward. You need these rewards because you also not just need to sort of boast about it, which is important, but it also celebrates achievement. And it communicates this achievement to others and inspires. And that's why also these t-shirts are important, and we shouldn't just put them aside. They are mainly marketing tools, to be fair, for everyone. We use them as well. But why are we doing this? This is all just about what? It's about low energy, it's about reducing carbon emissions, and these kind of things. But what is driving sustainability, actually? And the key driver for sustainability, obviously, is carbon emissions. It is the biggest challenge of our time, and still remains one of the biggest challenges of our time and times to come. And the reason why it is the biggest challenge is because we've ignored it for more than 40, 50 years. Since the mid-60s, we know that human-made carbon emissions are changing the climate. Since the mid-60s, we have scientific evidence that we're changing the climate through our doing. And we've not done enough for this. This one here is the carbon countdown. And this one here is a good example why suddenly carbon emissions and the climate emergency has jumped on the agenda. Why councils are committing to drastically reduce their carbon emissions by 2030. And if you talk to the industry, quite often what I hear then is that it is completely unachievable and an unrealistic result. Of course it is an unrealistic result, because for 50 years we've been sleeping, not doing anything about it really, and we have been using the same excuses not to do anything about it. But what this one means here is that this graph here shows if we want to reduce carbon or climate change and mitigate climate change and reduce or keep global warming within reasonable numbers, we have a certain amount of time to drastically curb our carbon emissions. If we want to keep carbon emissions to 1.5 degrees, which most scientists, 97% of all scientists, believe is a safe target to avoid catastrophic climate change, then you can see on here, to have a 50% chance of achieving that, we have 9.8 years. That takes us to 2030. A 50% chance to avoid catastrophic climate change. That also means a 50% chance of missing it. The 2030 target is not an ambitious target. It is our final chance to avoid catastrophic climate change. And here is a second misunderstanding. When scientists talk about catastrophic climate change, they do not mean really, really hot summers, really, really awful weather and rain. What they mean is avoiding automatisms. When scientists talk about catastrophic climate change, what it means is that if we reach this target or breach that target, then we trigger quite likely automatisms, like, for example, the melting of the permafrost, the melting of the ice caps, the reduction of the Amazon rainforest. That each of these events has a global impact of a scale that we can't reverse, and that will trigger the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And if we fail this target, we're not looking at 2 degrees, we're looking 4 to 6 degrees, which we can hardly do anything about it, even with carbon capture and storage. That's why this is important. And of course, it's not that we haven't done anything about it. We also have achieved great things. Lots of money has been invested into carbon energy efficiency. 2 years ago, annually, $230 billion were invested worldwide into energy efficiency, carbon reductions, and so on. It's a massive market, and of course, governments have been active. It's not that nothing has happened there. You can see on here, the dark blue one, 2/3 of that went into buildings. 2/3 of that went into reducing the carbon impact from buildings, 1/3 into transport. And the same is roughly true for the EU, the same is true for the UK as well. The problem with this one here is that it hasn't done anything. Over the last 30 years, we've achieved hardly anything. 30 years ago, 1/3 of carbon emissions came from buildings. Last year, 1/3 of carbon emissions still came from building. All the improvements in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of building regulations, all of that, statistically and overall, has done nothing in the UK. This one here is a graph from last year from Ofgem, and what you can see on here is the carbon reductions per sector over the last 10 years. And what you see on here is buildings is the orange one, that one. Nothing has changed. We're still emitting 30% of carbon emissions from our building. The only sector that has come down is one sector, and that's power. That's the only one that overall has reduced carbon emissions in the UK, and that's why we got off coal and reduced some output from industry, and that is the main impact on reducing our carbon emissions in the UK. And of course, the government has realized that. The government has realized that all the measures they've done over the last 20 years have done hardly anything overall. In small projects, of course, yes. And the strategy of managing carbon emissions in sort of the micro scale on a house-by-house basis has failed, essentially, on the overall picture. So the government 2 years ago has changed their tactic. And what they're now doing is they're looking at the macro level. What they are looking is, rather than focusing on zero carbon on each and every building, like the Code for Sustainable Homes used to do, they're now focusing on the energy supply. And what they're now doing is, essentially, is that they're moving our heating sector from gas onto the electricity sector. We then make that electricity sector carbon zero, and if the energy we use in our homes is carbon zero, it doesn't matter how much you use. It's still zero carbon. And this tackles two things. It tackles new build and existing building at the same time. But of course, there's some issues with that. And the main issue with this one here is also one thing is cost. If you move your electricity bill, your gas bill, your heating bill, which is mainly driven by gas in the UK, onto electricity, you will have a significant price increase. At the moment, on your average bill, gas makes half, roughly, onto your bill. That used to be, in 2021, an energy bill of £1,350 a year. That already has gone up to 2,300 this year, estimated, at the beginning of the year, estimated. Now, today, the government announced you'll get £400 from the government back. Yay! But they also expect another £800 price change end of the year. You'll pay easily, on average, £3,000 a year for heating, hot water, and energy by the end of the year. That's what the statistic says at the moment. Now, the problem here is you haven't changed from gas to electricity yet. If you change from gas to electricity, what will then happen is that section here, which is gas at the moment, in your actual overall amount, only makes this bit here and still contributes to half of your, only a fraction to your energy bill, although half of your gas comes actually from there. Now, if that changes from gas, but at the moment makes 53% of your energy bill, and you move that onto electricity, then what happens is we will easily quadruple your prices for that, because gas still is only a quarter of the cost of electricity at the moment. And if you don't do anything and move from gas to electricity, which might be clean, green, zero carbon electricity, your prices will go up significantly for the same thing. Part L and future home standards will only result in a marginal saving of 20–25%. That's all what you can achieve with the measures in there. And that will leave you, once this transition has moved on, without any further price increases, inflation, anything like that, just a move from gas to electricity from £2,300 to £4,750 a year. And this is something that will come over the next 3 to 5 years. However, there's another thing to this, because we haven't allowed for inflation. And this inflation element comes from this one here. This one here is the total electricity supply in the UK in a half-hourly rate. So this is everything in the UK, all industry, and so on. And you can see two things on here. One is more obvious. It's very even over the entire year, because that's what electricity supply is like. We don't store electricity like gas. Electricity is produced whenever there's a demand. So when you switch something on, that's when it's produced and supplied. Renewables don't work like that. Renewables you get when the wind blows. And that's important to understand. But at the same time, also, our heating demand is not even over the entire year. We have peak and troughs. The other thing, which you can't that obviously on here, is scale. If we overlay the actual heating demand half-hourly in the UK onto this one here, this is what we're looking at. The heating demand, in terms of peak, is 6 to 7 times the electricity we produce in this country at the moment. It took the government 10 years to produce 40% of that with renewables. By 2030, the government has promised to supply all the red stuff there through clean, green, offshore wind power. That will require enormous investments. That will require enormous investment from the government. And in the end, tax increases, but also who will be paying for it in the end will be us. And that will mean energy prices will easily go up 2 to 3, 4-fold over the next 3 to 5 years. What you've seen so far this year has nothing to do with carbon legislation. This is still to come and goes on top of that. We easily see energy prices over the next 3 to 5 years for the average home rise up to £8,000 to £10,000 a year. And that's probably optimistic. This will drive change. Not legislation in terms of saving carbons, not legislation in terms of reducing your emissions and all these kind of things. It will cost you an arm and a leg if you need that amount of energy to to heat your home and keep comfortable. And of course, there's this other thing. There's the performance gap with buildings. It's not like they're not doing energy-efficient buildings. The problem we have with energy-efficient design is that in the end, they perform very different. This one here is an interesting study. And this one also brings us to my favorite subject, Passive House. This one here is a study on 25 completed zero-carbon or low-carbon homes. These are all completed buildings, and they have carried out a co-heating test. A co-heating test, if you're not familiar with that, is a test where you remove the residents, you send them on holiday for a week in winter. So you take out user behavior. And then you heat up that building to comfort temperature, and measure the energy you need, adjusted for outside temperature, what it actually needs in terms of energy to stay at the 20 degrees. So it's like testing the efficiency of your car, more or less. So how many liters of fuel you need to keep that house warm. Now, and blue is the predicted design measure, red is the actual measured consumption of that building. Now, these are all low or zero carbon buildings. If they would have been perfect, then the red and the blue would be on the same level. Everything else is a design fault or workmanship fault or something going wrong in that system. What you can see on here are several things. First, there's obviously a very different opinion on what is a low or zero carbon building. Some of them are low or zero carbon because there's a 10% saving on building regulations. Others, up to 90%. The main reason for that is because we don't have a definition of zero carbon in this country. That was abolished with the Code for Sustainable Homes in 2016. That's why the last time when we had a clear, definitive target, what is zero carbon. Nowadays, you have different standards and they all look at it differently. The second thing you can see on here is they all got it wrong. All of them. And they all underestimated the actual heating demand. All of them. Not a single one overestimated it. And they all got it wrong between 10 and 300% or 250%. I can tell you something. All of these clients paid extra. And all of these clients paid extra because they were expecting more than just doing the good for the planet. I can promise you that from my experience working as an architect for the last 25 years. All of these clients expected a return. Hardly anyone got them. Some of them, quite a few of them, paid more than if they would have stayed in a building regulation building and only achieved that. Now, on here are also 3 passive houses. I wonder if you can spot them. And this also explains what the difference is between a passive house and a normal building. In a passive house, we're not looking at 10-20% savings, which are easily eaten up by inaccuracies, quality issues, and these kind of things. We're looking at 80-90% savings in a passive house. So we have much, much more tolerance when it comes to a rebound effect. The second thing is, passive house, as a design methodology, has been developed on measured, completed projects over the last 30 years. So everything that was learned and tested on these existing buildings was fed back into the design methodology, how you design better buildings. And that makes the robustness of a passive house. And passive house has a track record of predicting that. And even these ones failed to accurately predict it. Also here, the actual demand was 5 to 10% higher. But a passive house, you can heat a typical 3 to 4 bedroom homes for £100 a year. If that goes up 10%, and my client pays £110. If it fails and I pay 50% more, it's £50 more a year. It's still a success. It doesn't really matter. If I'm in my normal house and I only save 10% on my 2,300, for example, I'm down to 2,200. If that goes up 50%, and instead of 2,200, I pay over 3,000. I'm very disappointed, I can tell you. That's the difference between a passive house. And what that makes, of course, in terms of what we're here, the passive house sits down there. And it taxes exactly that bit. These savings on gas and fuel, domestic hot water demand and heating that we're looking at with a passive house development. And what is a passive house? A passive house as a standard is a relatively simple building. I'll just take you through that, which is, in terms of definition, it's quite often reduced to energy criteria. But what a passive house actually is has 3 criteria that you have to meet. There's an energy criteria, there's a comfort criteria, and there's a hygiene criteria. The comfort criteria means this: we're not achieving comfortable living environments by sticking in a radiator. We're achieving a comfortable living environment through building fabric and design. We implement a high-performance fabric, lots of insulation, triple glazing, and an airtight building envelope so that we have no drafts within that building, and we create comfort, even in the middle of winter, just through that building fabric. In terms of hygiene criteria, we're avoiding any condensation issues through high-quality, detailed designs, thermal bridge-free designs, and these kind of things, plus a ventilation system that constantly provides fresh air from the outside, no recirculation, no air conditioning, from the outside at optimum rates. We're not compromising on air tightness, we're not compromising on air quality, we're not compromising on issues around mold and condensation. It's a high-quality environment in terms of comfort, air quality, and also in terms of materials in there. And only when we've achieved that, then we reduce the energy demand by 90% to a level where a typical 15 square meter living room in the UK, in the middle of winter, 0 degrees outside, you can heat with 5 candles. If you achieve that, that's a passive house. And we do that with exactly the same measures as you would do in a normal building, lots of insulation on the outside, and floor, roof, facade. We then want an airtight structure. We're focused on this unwanted infiltration, not airtightness in terms of no ventilation, it's infiltration through gaps and cracks in the building fabric. Then we have the thermal bridge reduced design. So we look at all the junction details around containers. We have high performance windows and doors. We typically look at triple glazing with these kind of systems. And then we have a considered ventilation strategy, which usually is a whole house mechanical ventilation system when you look at new build properties. The same principles are designed nowadays into any housing scheme that you would find. They're just differently put together in a passive house in a more considered way and more focusing on design. Just one example now, very quickly. I'll run you through this one here. Shouldn't take that long. How much time do I have? A couple of minutes. I'll take you through this very quickly. So this one here is one of our examples, which is a retrofit project that we were involved with 2 years ago for Exeter City Council, for sanctuary housing and also for North Devon Homes. So we split it across 3 sites, where we looked at how we can retrofit this project here with minimal impact on the residents. Residents were to stay in place and to reduce the energy demand of this building, total energy demand, including appliances and everything, by 90%. We didn't just look at this one here, and Exeter City Council chose it. We actually looked at 6 of these properties, these ones in here, which were all the same. The main reason why we looked at that was that Exeter wanted to develop a prototype that they can roll out on a larger scale. First at the 6, and then in the follow-on project, look at the entire road of, I believe, 26 homes that we're looking at the second time. And the reason why they chose this is not because they only had these sort of 26 homes that they wanted to refurbish and retrofit. It's because Exeter City Council have 3,000 of exactly the same homes in that area. It's these typical 1950s council estates. And of course, they have all these negative things. When it comes to architecture, for example, it's very much sort of, yes, copy and paste a lot. They have issues around quality. But the big benefit and the chance in terms of carbon emissions is, we have here a prototype, they're all the same. They're from the same time, they have the same maintenance issues, they have the same maintenance cycle, the same work they all need doing to us, they have the same orientation, they're exactly the same buildings. You crack one of them, you crack them all. And that's the approach. Develop a cost-efficient version to retrofit one of them and then roll it out. This was done using a system, Energy Sprong. Energy Sprong is a system that is to achieve net zero energy over the course of a year. The system is subsidy-free. It's paid for through the energy savings from the residents. The landlord takes up a loan to finance this. The landlord gets the energy payments the tenants are paying now at the moment to the landlord, and the landlord uses that money to pay back the loan to upgrade the building over a 30-year time span. What the benefit is of that is, the tenants, although they don't save on energy on the last year, they're not exposed to rising fuel prices because they pay a fixed sort of fuel charge for their heating and hot water. So they are not exposed to fuel poverty and rising fuel prices. The landlord gets a new building fabric, new services strategy, and new components, and maintenance-free 25 years. Paid for through these energy savings. And of course, the planet gets the carbon savings, 90% reduction, and closer to a climate emergency. So win-win-win for everyone on this one in here. And the way that worked is, these buildings here, first of all, you strip them back and you find exactly the same things you find with any building in these kind of things. You find the wall ties rotten and roof trusses rotten and all these kind of things that you have to tackle with at the same time. And energy savings, carbon savings, will not pay for these kind of things. You have to allow for some maintenance money in that kind of pot as well. That's not what the purpose is of this project here. It's about upgrading them, but you have to bring them back, and that's what you can do. And this one here was no other than that. In terms of construction, the existing structure is this one here. We then insulated it from the outside, roof, floor, and wall, then put an air tightness line on the outside, which was a paint-on membrane, and with that system. The floor was insulated with robotic insulation, the residents staying in place, and these properties are retrofitted with residents in place in 10 days per property. So we have highly prefabricated solution. The floor insulation is a robotic installation. You have a small robot driving under the floor void in a small hole. It takes a survey in 3D, calculates the optimum way of insulating that, then sprays insulation between the rafters underneath. After that, carries out a thermal imaging survey to check that there are no thermal bridges and no spots left, carries out retrofit measures around these things, and then afterwards you get a full report that this thing has been insulated. Next, we then had pre-insulated panels. They came as one facade section ground floor, one facade section first floor, with windows installed and finishes in place. They were then lifted onto the wall. That's where they came in. Insulation was, they were then installed onto these brackets at the bottom in there. That's where they went in with the windows in there already. After that, the windows were taken out from the inside. That's the only measure that happened on the inside. And window reveals made good. They came, as you can see, with a finish applied on the outside already. Then mechanical ventilation was installed, which is a room-by-room system with these vents, which are especially like extract vents, but with the mechanical ventilation heat recovery, so they also retain 70% of the heat in these buildings. And then the roof was made airtight with a paint-on membrane and insulated. The roofs were then covered in photovoltaics. And here you can see how this system was meant to work, is that we could get economy of scale, not by doing one by one, but having a rolling process. And that was what this pilot was about, that the contractor's team starts on one building, and when they're finished on that building, they don't have to move on to another site, they just move on to the next building, and the next building. And suddenly, out of a 50 square meter project, you actually get something that can be, in real life, something like a 2,000 square meter project, which suddenly becomes interesting in terms of economy of scale and brings costs down for these retrofit measures in there. The same we did with the energy. All these were fitted with ground source heat pumps. The ground source heat pumps were all included in a energy pot, which is like a small garden shed. That garden shed was factory fitted with a hot water cylinder, a battery inverter for the photovoltaics, and a ground source heat pump produced in Cornwall. That came in these boxes in there. You can see how that was fitted in. The boreholes were put in, small foundation cast in concrete in the backyard, and then these boxes were installed, including all this equipment in there. Then the internal gas boilers were disconnected, and this system was plumbed into the existing system to provide all the hot water. And this is what they looked like before lockdown 2 years ago. I haven't yet been back, to be fair, to take a better picture of this one here. But you can see the new facade on there, the extended ridges, and how this has achieved it. And this has achieved a 90% saving on energy reductions, but also 90% carbon savings. And tackles viewer poverty, at the same time, subsidy-free, to Passive House standard. Thank you. Sorry for overrunning a little bit. Let me quickly introduce Simon, the next speaker. Simon is the CEO of Trustmark, the government-endorsed quality scheme covering work a consumer chooses to have done around their home. Very much this one here. When it comes to environmental sustainability, Simon is instrumental in the conversation around quality of retrofit projects and the grants created by government to support energy efficiency improvements. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm not quite sure how I follow that, to be honest with you. So, because I've probably got a few things that aren't quite as positive. Because actually, where we come from as the government-endorsed quality scheme, we see some of the downside of some of the retrofit in the building that goes on. And as an example, there is £6 billion worth of detriment left to consumers through home improvements annually. £6 billion of poor quality work. So we have to think about, as we move into this market, as we move forward, we have to be different. We have to do things differently. The government scheme itself, we are the only government-endorsed quality scheme. We have been around since the late 1990s. If you're from that era, you would remember something called the Quality Mark, and it actually launched in this area. So it's a long time ago. It evolved into what was Trustmark in 2015. And since then, we have been growing and looking, 2005, 2015 is where it started to change. In 2018, there was a review called the Each Home Counts Review. That review looked at two key things: insulation being fitted into properties and solar PV being fitted onto roofs. The reason for that, they both had high levels of non-compliance. High levels of detriment to a consumer. From that, there was a change. That change came about, and Trustmark really was reformed to then become this quality scheme that it is now being expected to deliver consumer protection. Yeah, it has a lot of areas around quality, and it does a lot of audit work. We really are aligned, to government, to scheme providers. Some of you will know the Federation of Master Builders, the National Federation of Builders, Gas Safe Register, NIC, EIC. They are all scheme providers within Trustmark. We have 42 in total now, and they work through a set of frameworks and a set of goals that really drive the quality and the standards right down through the supply chain in its entirety. If we think about what's coming down the line, this is where it becomes really about opportunity, supported by consumer protection, supported by quality. As an example, you're probably all aware now, we have a skills shortage. How bad is it? If we think about retrofit, and construction generally, these are numbers that came out about 3 weeks ago, 217,000 tradespeople short in construction. We are 270,000 people, tradespeople short for retrofit. This is up to 2030. By 2030, 561,000 tradespeople within construction and retrofit will be retiring and leaving the sector. We have a current unemployment level of about 1.3 million, and we have 1.2 million job vacancies. Where are these people going to come from? Where are the consumers going to find those tradespeople, to undertake the work? It's a real challenge. Where are the apprentices coming through? Where are the people that are retraining coming from? The opportunity is absolutely massive to bring people in. And we have to do something. Otherwise, we would just compound all the challenges we have. There's a couple of bits on this slide, really, just to talk through. The vetted installers, all those things you would expect from the quality scheme. But towards the bottom there's something called, the Custodian of the Retrofit Standards. For those of you in the domestic sector, you will know around the PAS 2035 area, the whole house approach to retrofit. So we are no longer just putting a single measure in. We are now talking about looking at a house in its entirety. We are looking at the way that you treat the fabric before you just put in a heat pump or you do other things. You have something called the boiler upgrade scheme at the moment. That's looking at, I think, up to a £6,000 grant for heat pumps being put into properties. Within that, if you stick to the standards, you also have to treat the fabric if it needs treating before you install the heat pump. If we start thinking about the scale of what we have to do to our housing stock, that's where it gets really quite interesting. If you look at that, that's the EPC, whether you love or hate EPCs, by the way, I appreciate there's lots of different views. This is the scale of what we are facing. Over 80% of the property that we have in the UK is a C or less EPC. So if you start thinking of the investment that will take, and you think about the money that has to be spent, anything 20 to maybe £100,000 on a property, if you are pushing it towards passive house standards. Single measures, not really the thing to do anymore. You now have to think about a multi-measure install. You break the number down, and you see that there, 24 million homes of our 28.3 million homes will need retrofitting by 2050. Big numbers. Even bigger when you put it into 2,300 homes per day, 7 days a week for the next 28 years. How are we going to get there? Really don't know, if I'm honest, because it is a £600 to £700 billion market. And we are driving that more and more and more. The energy crisis we have at the moment, with the cost of living, and it isn't just about energy, it's general things that we are seeing go up. So people are now becoming more interested in how they retrofit a property. How do I reduce my energy cost? You have to look at sort of the scale. I think Tomas was, in a way, showing a really big scale of what could happen as we go to electrification, as we move away from habitually what we've known for many, many years. So there is a real challenge in front of us. And I think here, when you look at this diagram, simple diagram, a really simple diagram, I get asked many, many times, what's retrofit? because we all assume everybody knows retrofit. You talk to your consumers. If you're a consumer and you look onto the internet, you will get so much information. Within about 20 minutes, you will be completely confused, not really understand what you're doing, and you will be thinking, I don't know where to go. Retrofit is about taking an asset, a property. It's about insulating the property, fabric first, windows, doors, insulation. It's about low carbon heating sources. It's about EV charging that's coming into play. It's around the heat pump generation that we're putting in. And it's about convincing consumers that it's the right thing to do. Because actually, a lot of what we do is costing huge amounts of money. As an example, I suppose, the bottom here, if you were to buy this house, and this is something that we worked out with some lenders, over a 25-year period, on a standard asset as we move forward, you will pay probably, I don't know, between 2.5% or 3% on a mortgage. Your asset value or your energy costs will remain the same. Your asset value goes up slightly. If you look at borrowing slightly more on a mortgage, and if you look now for green mortgages, green equity release that's coming to the marketplace, you will get lower rates. You will get preferential treatment. Which means when you go through that whole same process, number of years over, you retrofit the property, you look at your reduction in energy cost, but the extra asset value that you have created, that gave you £102,621 saving over a 25-year period. Examples, but worked on real life numbers at the moment. So if we start thinking about that, people think, oh, that's sort of not real. But when you bring it back to reality at £80 per week for the next 25 years, that becomes real. That becomes a real impact on where we are today with energy. So we do need to think about how we move forward. Help with energy bills, energy efficiency, healthier homes. Sorry, it's my phone unfortunately telling me I've got to take a tablet. You always forget the one alarm, don't you? It's always the way. Yeah, phone switched off, watch is switched off, the alarm goes off. So, healthier homes. As another example, the health service funds about £18 billion a year to the outcome of unhealthy homes, to people that live in homes where there are issues like damp, poor ventilation. 18 billion. So you start putting these numbers together, and all of a sudden, we have to do something to improve. We have to do something better. We have to move forward. We have to save money. We have to support the transition to net zero. Won't get into the debate about net zero. Too many definitions of net zero, and how you get there. And electric vehicles. I guess, if you're like me, 5 years ago, you drove down the road, how many electric vehicles do you see? Not many. How many do you see now? They're everywhere. They are coming in more and more. But they are taking more power consumption. It's moving towards electrification. How many of our infrastructure in our domestic properties will take more than one EV? Because most properties, or most owners of properties, now have more than one vehicle. So you've got to think about the load that goes into a property. There are so many things that come into what we're talking about here with retrofit. Where does the funding come from? So very briefly, because I'm mindful that we are probably over time already, local authorities are looking at local programs that they will work with owner-occupiers to now move forward with preferential deals to improve their property. We have to find the people in the area to do it, but it is coming. There is central government support for fuel poverty. Did any of you hear the news? Well, it was through the Bank of England, talking about fuel poverty going from 2.6 million in this UK, to over 12 million homes. 12 million, that's nearly 50% of our actual property total, and homeowners, or people living in homes, being in fuel poverty. Definition of fuel poverty is another thing for another day. We have government policy. Government policy needs to be sustainable, long-term policy, not short, sharp, boom to bust style things. You need policy. As a consumer needs a policy, as a business needs a policy. We have to have something that is looking not just 3 years or even a year in some cases. We need 5-year, 10-year plans. I think they may start to deliver those. Not sure when, but I think they may come. We have a whole piece here growing around the lending sector. I'll talk about that separately on a slide in a second. And we have VAT and tax benefits. People like the Federation of Master Builders and others have been fighting for a long time to see reduced VAT. We've got to create a drive, a demand, and we have to help people achieve what they need to do. So there is a huge amount to play for at the moment. But I believe this is where we will see the real driver, without a doubt. The government, through the Energy Company Obligation, a fuel poverty scheme, fund about £1 billion worth of measure improvements a year. So that's energy improvements. The finance sector, however, are now really interested in building green mortgages, reduced rate mortgages that will support a householder or an owner-occupier taking their property and developing it so that it becomes more efficient, costs less to operate and to run, but also has a better asset value. Why are they wanting to do this? They are de-risking the housing stock. They also have a duty. There is something called NZBA, which actually is coming into play throughout Europe, where 70% of the lenders now have to report on green lending. So they have to move into this sector. The FCA are bringing in a consumer duty this year, which means that the lenders now have to look at how that lending is being used in terms of improving property. It's a really different playing field we're walking into. Equity release. Everybody, if you're like me, would look at equity release and just go, oh, I've heard it all before, Borrow £30,000, pay back £300,000, all those things. There is now a new code, there is new licensing coming in, and there is green equity release being launched. If you think about the energy costs, you think about what it may cost longer term to do these things, it will create more of a market. It will create more work, more opportunity. This is coming down the line rapidly. I mean, really, really quickly. I've been around in the industry, construction, energy, for way too long. 35, maybe 40 plus years. And I've never seen so much change. You've got new building regulations. You've got the building safety regulator coming into play. They are all drivers now to make these things happen. These are just some of the schemes. You would have heard lots of these. Okay, so you have different schemes available if you are in fuel poverty. You have different schemes if you are in the private rental sector. Interesting one, private rental sector. On this next slide, I'm sure you're all aware, if you are a landlord and you have a new tenancy that you issue on the 1st of April 2025, the property must meet an EPC-C requirement. There are 3.2 million properties in private rental that will have to be upgraded by the 1st of April 2025. 3 years. How's it going to be achieved? Where's it going to be done? And it's all coming back, through sustainability, through achievability, through all those things that we are talking about and trying to achieve. We have decarbonisation. We have the improving energy performance through lenders. No one's seen this yet, but there is a rumour that by 2025 there could be legislation in play that will require a certain EPC level when you go to sell your house. Things are coming. Are you aware that there is a property passport, property logbook that is coming into play? So you will have a requirement in the future when you sell your house that there is a logbook showing the work that you've had undertaken, how it's been undertaken, and how it's protected. It will pick up all the other elements around it. It will pick up your energy costs. It will link to smart metering. These things are coming, whether we like it or not. And as they come, they create the opportunity, they create the challenge in terms of protecting consumers at the same time. Very brief slide. This is just talking about some of the challenges to achieve this. The consumer knowledge. As an example, I had some work done at my house. I had 4 quotes for something quite modern in terms of technology. 4 completely different quotes, 4 things that actually even I didn't understand. You know, I don't get some of the percentages and all those different things. What I wanted was something that told me how I could take my property on this journey. We will see in the next 6 to 12 months, lots of new software launched by banks to help consumers on that journey. Those banks will be looking for consumers to be supported on that process. They will be looking for businesses to help on that process. So it's really important that we get this right. Grants, green funding, offsetting. I am pretty sure some of us in this room live in properties that may be EPC-D. And you're probably sat here thinking, how on earth could I get this to a B? It's solid wall, it might be thatch roof, it could be all those things. It's a real challenge, real challenge. Electrification can do some of it, but we need to be planning on how we do that, and offsetting can become part of some of that. The finance and support, the how do I do this? This is no longer, you know, just coming in and changing a gas boiler. It's no longer just fitting a kitchen. The disruption that can take place when you retrofit a property is pretty intense, because you can be ripping up floors, you can be changing roofs, you can be doing all sorts of things. So people need to plan and need to understand. But the really important thing is on the end there, which is I spend this money, I upgrade my property, I want to validate that I've spent that money for the right reason and I'm getting the right outcome and I'm protected. Financial protection. So we ensure that any consumer that has work done is financially protected, because the investment you're making is no longer a few thousand, it's tens of thousands. You have to have easy access to the dispute service. We have an ombudsman in play. We have mediation tools. All these things now that help when something may go wrong. And if you think about the opportunity for something to go wrong when you're doing that level of work, it's far greater than it is on a smaller piece of work. So we have to take all these things into account. This slide is just a data warehouse. So we now, for the government and for the lenders, have to run a data store. That data store records who did what, when, where, how it's protected, and that will link into the passports in the future. So this is about building some security for business, security for consumers, and making sure that these all work together. And that is me. Thank you very much. I'd like now to hand over to Andrew. Andrew is the CEO of the National Custom and Self-Build Association. And I think he's as passionate about self-build as I am passionate about my business and Trustmark in protecting consumers. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Do I press the button? Which way? There we are. Great. Most people call me ABC. Please feel free to do so. So there's something really weird about this country, and that is that we think our housing market is normal, our new homes market. We think it's completely normal that we have almost no choice over the single most important and expensive thing that we will ever buy in our lives. We think that's normal. It's not. It is not. Across the world, the developed world, on average, 4 out of 10 new homes are built to the design and specification of the person that lives in them. 4 out of 10. In this country, we're about 7%. We should be building 80,000 homes a year that way, if we were normal. If we're in Germany, we'd be building 120,000. There is a website in Germany where you can look it up on Google, it'll translate it, called musterhaus.net. And the starting point when you get there is choose from 2,400 different homes from 350 different manufacturers. That is the start. That's before you modify them. That is before they are individually then customized. There are 30 parks, there's 30 house shops in Germany with over 1,000 homes that you can go and visit and choose from the different designs and structures. Yeah, these are not far away. And unsurprisingly, in that world, here in the UK, only about a third of people, when they're surveyed, would say they would ever live in a new house. A third of people. Can you imagine only a third of people saying they'd ever buy a new car or buy new clothes or a new phone or a new computer? That is what happens when consumer choice is taken away from people. So, what is custom and self-build? Custom and self-build is the principle that the customer is in charge of the home that they build, that they live in. It's not that the customer builds the home themselves. That very rarely happens. It's fundamentally around the concept of customer choice, and it's broadly split up into self-build, which is a single plot, typically, but not always, an architect-designed home, or custom build, which is a multi-plot site. There's one Graven Hill at the moment. You may have seen it on Kevin MacLeod and Grand Designs. There are 1,900 plots there, but most of them are somewhere in between. So custom build, multi-plot, single plot is typically called self-build. Neither terms are very useful. I tend to use self-commissioning, but that's what it is about. There's some details at the moment from a recent survey we did. Most people that do this at the moment have quite a lot of money, and that's because it's so difficult to get hold of land with permission to build your own home these days. And we'll see a bit more about that. Luckily, the Prime Minister had to check that he was still the Prime Minister, but when I put these slides together last year, he asked an MP called Richard Bacon to review about scaling up this sector. That review's been published, and any day now the government's response will come out, so look out for that. I've got 3 or 4 copies if anyone wants to catch me afterwards to have wants to get a copy of that report. In terms of this, I don't know how well you could read this, but there are a number of benefits. Every local authority in this country must keep a register of people that would like to build or commission a house to be built. It's called the right to build. Every local authority must keep that register, and if 100 people join the register, 100 plots must be permissioned by that local authority. Now, in practice, they don't do that very well, and the government's in the process of reviewing the legislation. They must do that. I keep saying this, in a couple of weeks' time, the government's going to launch a scheme called Help to Build, which will give you help and support. I'll explain that a bit. Self-build mortgages are really good for builders because they ensure that the money is paid regularly, whereas if they build a home, they only get the money at the end. And there's an exemption from CIL, which is the Community Infrastructure Levy, and that's something imposed by the Central Council, by your council. That means it's cheaper to self-build, and there's a requirement in other areas as well. So Help to Build, it will enable you to borrow more with a smaller deposit and at a lower rate than could otherwise be the case. In a sense, the government lends 20% of the cost of the build, the mortgage provider provides the other 75%, you put in a 5% deposit. And the lender is protected because the government, should anything go wrong, lose their money first. And that means that you can borrow much more than you could normally. This is an example of a typical customer if you're looking to build or commission your own home. So at the moment, because you'd need a 20% deposit, it's really hard to get a mortgage on self-build. You can only afford a very cheap property. Obviously, no one can build a house really for that amount, but under the new scheme, it'll be substantially improved. There'll be much more access, and if the plots come forward, then suddenly custom and self-build will become a much more affordable and available option for those with more limited deposits. So that is coming soon. As I say, the community infrastructure levy, if you live just about anywhere around here, you won't have to pay that levy if you're a self-builder, and that's there to offset the fact that there are additional costs in self-building, because obviously you're buying stuff from Bradford's or your local builder's merchant or your builder is. They're not buying it in scale, they're not buying it in advance, they can't store it easily, so they have to buy it in smaller lots. It costs a bit more, but of course what you don't have to do is to pay the profit that the big builders make when they develop their homes as well. So there are offsets and benefits, and broadly, as a result of these savings and structures, most people that self-build get a better home for a lower price than if they bought one brand new. A local plan, so every local plan, in fact, since 2012, every local plan should assess the number of people that want to do that, and they should set out how they are going to deliver that. In practice, many of them don't. In practice, councils are often opposed by large speculative developers who don't like giving up the options and opportunities for them to build for other people to do their own. But they should be in local plans. And the last bit I wanted to talk about is the boiler upgrade scheme. We've talked about this already, but uniquely, if you are self-building, rather than buying a new house from a speculative developer, then you can access that scheme. It's the only new build process when you can. And as we said, that's £5,000 off a ground source or air source heat pump, or £6,000 off a biomass boiler. So that's a bit about self-build and a bit about the opportunities for it. And I wanted to talk about what actually happens when people are given the choice. So if people are given the choice about how they build their homes, then what are the kind of things that they do? So the first thing I wanted to point out is, given the choice, roughly 50% of people currently choose a sustainable heating source. Largely it's an air source heat pump, but there's ground source and biomass, a small extent. But something getting on for about half of all self-builders go for a sustainable solution. And of course that doesn't happen if you go out and buy the house new. That doesn't happen as well. The other thing is that a substantial amount, something like 40% opt to have solar panels. And again, that doesn't happen on new homes when people aren't given the choice. And then we looked at people that, so these are people that have built, and then we looked about what they build of, and again, people choose substantially different methods of building when they're given the choice. About 50% of all new homes are built are using modern methods of construction. So typically that's around prefabricated timber panels, SIPs as well, another type of timber paneling system, and with timber frame as well. So again, when people are given the choices they make are very different from those that they are naturally presented with. And the advantage of many of these systems is they're built to give you difference within your home. And there are many reasons why you may want difference. Some may be about taste, but they may be about abilities, disabilities, they may be about lifestyle, they may be about a family, they may be about your values, they may be all kinds of things. They may just, we've forgotten in this country that new homes can kind of empower you and make your life better. Doesn't it sound weird to say that? Hey, I've got a new home and my life is better because of it. Right. In terms of future self-builders as well, then pretty much the same thing. So they're looking much less at traditional masonry. So it's the largest type currently, but they're definitely moving away from that, definitely moving towards the kind of options that exist. And when we asked them how important is sustainability, then we got massively high scores out of it. So again, the challenge is that if we give people the choice, then and the control and the confidence that what they are getting is what they paid for, then they will make the right choices. Are there some challenges? There are, and we'll talk about this. So we have a really bizarre thing in this country that most large mortgage lenders will not allow you to buy a home that is not made of brick and stone. They'll have a few exceptions, things like House, which isn't. It's a prefabricated house. But they won't allow them generally. So we've got some work to do with lenders, because if we're going to move towards net zero, we need to be using more timber, more straw, more sustainable resources in the building of our homes. They're also, and this is really winds me up, so I spent 25 years working for a mortgage lender, but they will not lend you more to build a house that will cost you less to run. That's just bizarre, isn't it? And as a result of it, we haven't got a dynamic in this country where people can pay more in order to get a better house because the lender will lend them more money. And as a result of that, if you try and sell a house that is more sustainable, you'll end up only typically getting the same price for it at the moment, and these things may be changing after what we've heard today, but typically because that customer won't be able to access more finance because the house will be less to run. And then the other issue, again, we've had discussed today, is we merely need to make sure that both architects and builders fully understand what they need to do in order to make a house efficient in terms of energy. And in particular, we've talked about the challenges of air tightness and thermal bridging. So, there is a role for all of us here to make sure that the right thing happens. And at that point, I'm going to stop, and we're going to hand over remotely via Giles to HSBC, who are going to talk about green finance. Thank you.
I thought I'd come up just in case the IT doesn't do what it's meant to. Thanks very much, Andrew. And really interesting to listen to both Simon and Andrew before HSBC, who are now going to talk about what the banks are doing around this and where green finance is going. So sadly, Emma has got COVID, so she's not here, and Mira can't make it. So they pre-recorded very kindly, and I'm now going to see if I can get it to play.
Thank you, Giles, and thank you to the Bradfords team for inviting us to this important Building Sustainable Communities event. As Giles has mentioned, we'll be presenting on sustainable finance and HSBC's offerings in regards to helping clients transition to a lower carbon economy. My name is Emma Milburn. I'm one of the Sustainable Finance Directors in HSBC's commercial banking business, and I'm also pleased to be joined by my colleague Mira, Sustainability Manager from our retail business, who will cover the residential mortgage market. Thanks, Mira. We know that a large number of countries have set ambitions to transition to net zero, and the UK has written into law that it will transition to net zero by 2050. Science tells us that emissions will need to reduce by 45% by 2030 to enable us to achieve this net zero ambition. So collectively, we all need to be creating plans and pathways to accelerate this process. It's clear governments cannot do this all on their own, so the private sector, businesses and individuals will need to step up and allocate capital. Globally, the investment required is estimated to be around $1 to $2 trillion per year. So at HSBC, we are acutely aware that as a global organisation, we need to be at the forefront of these goals. In 2020, HSBC announced our commitment to be net zero in our own operations by 2030 and net zero in our financed emissions by 2050. And to support this, we've pledged $1 trillion of finance and investment this decade. We have also pledged to support customers in their transition journeys by not just providing finance, but also by providing guidance, sector research, sharing best practices, and thought leadership. So why does sustainability actually matter? This next slide just covers a few statistics from the 2021 Hsbc Navigator survey, which is a survey we conduct annually. And in 2021, it was across 7,352 businesses operating in 14 different markets. We also conduct a sustainable finance and investment survey. As you can see from the slide, some of the key statistics that came out were that just under half of all business customers surveyed were feeling some pressure to be more sustainable. 78% of all businesses said that sustainability would have a positive impact on growth, and 94% of investors expected to move away from ESG challenged businesses. And in addition to those statistics, 39% of businesses surveyed already had a climate target, while 45% plan to set one in the next year. So let's look, why is it good for business? If we look at consumer demand, in a recent Deloitte survey, 1 in 3 consumers claimed to have stopped buying certain brands and products if there were sustainability concerns. Therefore, if you are not sustainable, it could potentially lead to a loss of business if you have no adaptation plans. It can also help your brand stand out. It sends a message that you are doing the right thing, and it can make you stand out in the marketplace amongst your competitors. Reduced costs can often be seen. Sustainable business models do tend to have lower costs and are more efficient. And finally, it can drive innovation. In the built environment, we are seeing more and more clients, including smart technology in the design and retrofit of buildings, whereby, for example, building energy usage is perhaps monitored. Innovation is also being seen in the development of alternative construction materials. Next slide, please, Mira. So just moving to the sustainable finance market just generally. This slide here, as you can see, from the timeline, sustainable finance data has been recorded since around 2013, 2014. And it's very clear that finance will play a key role in delivering on net zero and assisting in the transition to a lower carbon economy. The market, particularly around sustainability-linked loans, which I will come on to later, and bonds has exploded, and a doubling can be seen between 2020 and 2021. Overall, you can see here, the market went from 762 billion of debt issuance to 1.6 trillion in 2021. Typically in the built environment, on the commercial side of the business, we are seeing a desire for the following 2 products. So the sustainability linked loan. This type of loan aims to facilitate and support environmentally and socially sustainable economic activity by linking the borrower's cost of finance to sustainability metrics. Predetermined performance targets are mutually agreed between the borrower and the lender, which are typically benchmarked from existing historical company data. The targets have to be material and ambitious. Determining the use of proceeds of the loan is not a key component of a sustainability-linked loan. The purpose of the loan is typically for general corporate purposes. The idea is that it supports a company in achieving its ESG ambitions in subsequent years. Sustainability-linked loans are aligned to the sustainability-linked loan principles, which are issued by the Loan Market Association. And these are voluntary recommended guidelines. The guidelines were issued back in 2019. So as you can see, it's a relatively new product. There are 5 main pillars which need to be considered when you structure a sustainability-linked loan, which are evidencing and understanding a company's ESG strategy. It's about setting the targets, setting the economic outcome, i.e. the loan interest margin adjustments, depending on whether or not they meet a target. The other pillars are around reporting and obtaining independent verification of data. So this type of loan is typically aimed for some of our larger businesses. Just to give you an idea of sort of example targets that we are seeing set across the business, targets do tend to address multiple areas of ESG. Some common targets seen are reductions in scope 1 and 2 2 and 3 emissions. Other targets often are set that are often seen are gender diversity targets, ethnicity targets, EPC improvements, maybe affordable housing provisions. Some companies are putting in provisions for number of apprenticeships offered, and we quite often see water and waste management targets. But the key thing to remember with this type of loan is that not one size fits all. Targets will differ from company to company, as many will be on a different stage of the transition journey, even if operating in the same sector. So the next slide is just a case study for you to review. So this is a well-known house builder, Vistry Group, and HSBC worked with Vistry Group in refinancing their £500 million revolving credit facility in December 21. They decided to structure it as a sustainability-linked loan, as following their new group formation in 2020, they had established a new sustainability strategy, which was aligned to the UN Sustainability Development Goals. The strategy notably included commitments to set out a roadmap to net zero carbon emissions and targets to meet recommendations of the TCFD financial disclosures that are required. HSBC acted as a document and sustainability coordinator for this transaction, and there were a syndicate of banks involved. So the parties agreed on the following performance targets, which were a reduction in scope 1 and 2 emissions by 4.2% per year, and that's based on a science-based trajectory. The second target was around investing in people. Vistry proposed a commitment to put 550 learners through the company's in-house skills academy. And the final performance targets was around homes and communities. They pledged to deliver a year-on-year increase in affordable homes over and above any 106 requirements. Typically, we do tend to see around 3 performance targets on this type of loan, but we have seen up to 8 before, and they tend to be a mixture of environmental, social, and governance. The sustainability-linked loans set clear guidance on the company's ambitions to make a difference, because what we believe now is that the message is not just about committing to net zero, but it's about how are we going to get there and what are we going to do. So green loans are loans that are made available for a specific green project. So an example of a green project can be seen to the right here. For example, either a green building, a climate change adaptation, biodiversity projects, clean transportation, or, for example, renewable energy. Green loans are also aligned to the Loan Market Association guidelines. The Green Loan Principles reference 4 pillars, which are understanding the use of proceeds, i.e. it has to be used for a green project. We have to look at the process for evaluation, so I'll come on to that. The third pillar is around, again, the management of those proceeds, and 4, again, reporting annually. So when it comes to sustainable financing in the built environment, we of course typically see green buildings. According to the World Green Building Council, it is a building that in its design, construction, or operation reduces or eliminates negative impacts and can create positive impacts on our climate and natural environment. Green buildings preserve precious natural resources and improve our quality of life. So the types of certification typically seen for a green building are schemes such as LEED Gold and above, BREEAM Excellent and above, HQM 4-star, CEQA Good or higher, or any other sort of regional, national or international standards is key in evaluating that green project in the built environment. EPC ratings of B and above are also considered. And just to give you an example of a case study for a specific green loan here. So this is the King's Cross Cadence development. So HSBC acted as sole green loan coordinator on this green loan transaction with NatWest in 2020. So the specific use of proceeds here was to develop a green building. The Cadence residential development was actually targeting Code for Sustainable Homes Level 4, and the scheme also had a mandatory requirement to achieve a 19% improvement on Part L CO2 emissions and a maximum water use rate of 105 litres per person per day limit. The scheme also had 103 units, of which 60 were affordable. At the time of this financing, Argent, the developer, had delivered more BREEAM outstanding buildings than any other developer globally, and have also to date undertaken several sustainable finance transactions. And HSBC are really proud to have been involved in the whole regeneration project in the King's Cross area in London. So as you can see, we have helped a considerable number of large corporates operating in the built environment to date. However, during 2021, we identified that there was a huge gap in the market to support small and medium enterprises. We know that micro, small and mid-sized enterprises care about their environment and social performance. However, generally, they do have limited in-house resources to address ESG issues. We also know that SMEs need finance to help them advance their sustainability agenda. So the Sme Fund Proposition was launched earlier this year. This fund is available to UK SMEs with a group annual turnover of up to 25 million. The proposition offers a 1% cashback for loans used for green purposes under our eligibility criteria. And for anybody that's interested, the eligibility criteria can be found on our website. To claim the cashback, customers need to simply upload evidence to our portal within 12 months of drawdown. The cashback is available on loans from £1,000 to 25 million and from £50,000 to 25 million on asset finance transactions. The types of green projects that we've assisted to date with have been purchase of electric vehicles, heat pumps, solar panels, smart meters, wind turbines, and we've also funded recently an aggregates washing and recycling plant. Some of these requests have been taken up or been requested following the spring budget announcements, where VAT has been reduced to 0 from 5%, which is really, really encouraging. So in summary, HSBC has got a significant amount of sector expertise. We've got around 1.5 million commercial customers across 53 countries in the world. So we are in a really good position to share best practices, share knowledge with UK businesses and help them support their sustainability ambitions. We have some other future projects in line, and that will be things like a retrofit loan. So we're heavily focusing on our efforts to try and deliver something in that space. And we're also looking to try and deliver something in the social loan space. So thank you for listening. I'm now going to hand over to Mira, who will talk to you about our residential mortgage proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Great. So as Emma's mentioned, sustainability is a core pillar of how HSBC are moving forward today. And this really aligns with the government ambitions as mentioned earlier as well. The key for this and homeowners is that there's going to be a deep infrastructural challenge happening. Presently, over 60% of the UK's housing stock has an energy rating of C or below, meaning there's going to be much greater investment from homeowners from across the country to try and adapt their properties to meet the new EPC requirements that will be rolling out in the medium to long-term future. We also think it's our responsibility as retail lenders to be able to provide our customers with choice and the knowledge to do so. Primarily, it's been a marketing myth that sustainability is the premium option. However, in light of the cost of living crisis and also the unpredictable rates of fuel cost, renewable energy sources have seen to be one of the most stable sources of energy in comparison to conventional sources of energy. We know that this may seem tricky and complex to consumers, but therefore this is the nature of being able to educate our customers and being able to go on that journey with them to ensure that we're able to provide them with choices that suit their lifestyles. Moving on from this, we also have to understand that a green mortgage is a part of our evolving needs of our customers. Green mortgages are an entirely new segment of home buying products, but this is just, as I mentioned, the beginning of much greater work around retrofit loans as well, as is what's happening in the CMB business. And we're seeing there's much more market movement happening at the moment. However, it is largely premature, and we'll dig into a bit deeper as to why this is in the following slide. As you can see at the moment, the green mortgage market is really driven by two key approaches. The first approach favours home buyers being rewarded for purchasing properties which are already rated as A or B. Typically, these are very new properties and represent a very small selection of the UK's home portfolio. As we can see, NatWest, Barclays, Nationwide are offering lower interest rates for customers who want to purchase a home that already has an EPC rating of an A or a B. We also then move on to what I like to call the greater hands-on approach, where banks are leading the way by providing their customers with digital tools and assets that enable the customer to understand what work they may need to do to their homes which aren't A's or B's to try and grow their EPC for future financial incentive and immediate reward. So we've got with Lloyds the digital assets of the home tool, with TSB the additional borrowing rate, and with Halifax a more guided approach where customers' rewards is dependent on the type of retrofit they choose to have with Halifax's own selected partners, again showing another innovative and creative solution to the problem that customers may be facing with. We know that retrofitting is a really overwhelming process, so trying to break this down for our customers is really key. Our own approach to this is very much in its infancy, as we want to ensure that we deliver a best-in-class approach. One of our key priorities, as is mentioned throughout my piece in this, is the education. Education not only for our customers, but also for our colleagues who design our propositions. And we're really keen to ensure that we're able to create a proposition that's accessible for all homeowners. And that's really been a key driver for the development of our green mortgage. The FCA guidelines and greater activity from a regulatory perspective are key for driving what a green mortgage would look like, and also what green products will look like across the retail product suite. Again, as I mentioned, the concept of a just transition is key to what we do at HSBC UK. So again, we're really open to understanding what creative solutions we can have in place. And finally, we're really keen to leverage the experience of SMEs on this topic. As you'll see across other lenders as well, everyone is reaching out to understand where the best resources are and how we can create a really elevated customer journey to ensure that our customers get the most out of their experience and the most out of their investment from their retrofit. Finally, what I've done here is outlined some key organisations which you can use to keep yourself updated on this topic as well. Some key points to note here: the government domestic private rented sector consultation has concluded. However, you are able to sign up to understand what future updates will be available in this. Presently, the EPC guiding principles say that by 2025, rented homes will have to reach an EPC rating of C, and then it's predicted to go to B target for 2030. I hope that was really useful, and I'm sure Mira and I will be happy to take questions that are sent in afterwards as well, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Right, one left to go. Oh, and some might say left the best till last. So I'd now like to introduce, for a final presentation this evening, Victoria. Victoria is the sales director at Galion Homes, one of our local developers. And Galion, sustainability built into the heart of how they go about doing things. And I'm really excited to have Victoria here because some of the products we've got upstairs I know have been trialled in Galion's houses to great success. So Victoria, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let you take the stage.
Thank you, Giles. As I was warned yesterday by Giles, I'm the only barrier between you and the bar, so I'm going to flick through these as quickly as possible. I'm sure the people in Red Ruth Rugby Club, they're already halfway there. So who is Galion? Well, we're a small rural bespoke developer based in Baddeley, just outside Glastonbury. And as it says here, we are proudly delivering legacy projects within rural communities with a passion to protect and preserve the neighbourhoods it serves. We aim to build beautifully, but our mission is to build right. Our founder, Angus MacDonald, is a local farmer, but he's also an entrepreneur and visionary, bringing over 30 years of experience of award-winning development in the Southwest. He's a keen advocate of the climate change movement and has trailblazed his way through various sectors within the renewable industry. As you can imagine, building in rural villages can be somewhat challenging and contentious, but what drives us is our passion for the people and the communities in which we build. Each village will have its own architectural identity, and so it's important to us, but most important to our neighbours, to ensure that we set our sights on the vernacular rather than jar with it. When back in 2018 we sat down to identify our ethos, whilst all these points were high on the agenda, for all the reasons I've just mentioned, it was sustainability and carbon footprint that really stood out to all of us. So, all these aspirational points sound fantastic, that you've just seen in the last slide, but how can we ensure that we future-proof our homes in a sustainable but financially viable way? This slide speaks for itself, but rather than see sustainable build as a huge mountain to climb, it's important to see it more as a smaller bite-sized areas which can be cherry-picked in according to your build and business model. As we become more accomplished and understanding of the sustainable build sector, we can add to our business model and the technologies we offer. It's not just about installing expensive trailblazing initiatives either. For instance, written policies issued to site staff and contractors on matters such as waste and recycling methods or such like are also a useful way of achieving buy-in from the whole team. So our bite-sized pieces of the jigsaw were eventually determined into 5 rules of thumb: planning, subcontractors and suppliers, construction, onto design and interiors, and arguably most important to us, the environment and biodiversity. So architectural planning. It's so important to choose an architect who is equally committed to the ESG movement as we are. The way ideas are bounced about the table from the off, well before planning application is submitted, is so vital. An application submitted that can clearly be seen to have a well thought out sustainability offering will only serve you in good stead through the planning process. Starting close to the end goal for the planning officer rather than at the beginning avoids endless back and forth with the various planning stakeholders. These are rather obvious points, but good reminder of how architectural planning stage of your build is vital to the success of it. So subcontractors and suppliers, again, rather obvious points here, but they're important to drive your team to succeed in the sustainability goals and within your own business model. Team buy-in, both internal and external, are paramount for the success of your aspirations in this area. Don't be afraid to ask the awkward questions. You'll be surprised by the response. Most suppliers, as you all know probably, and subcontractors we deal with already have amazing sustainability policies in place and offer lots of things such as package removal and recycling, and our groundwork team were happy to put HVO oil into their site machinery, so that was fantastic. Construction. So this is a little bit difficult for me because I'm no professor of MMC. But at Galion, we use a number of different building techniques as well as some more traditional methods. We've heard today about timber frame and other methods. We also use polytherm clay bricks, and we use our own local stone sourced on site. I'll go on to that later. So a good mix of this MMC is a great place to start in order that you can identify what works best for you and your subbies. Here I've listed a few of Galion's initiatives to help make our homes and our business more sustainable. Some of these, again, are becoming conditions of planning. For instance, EV charging points are now a requirement on most developments. But only back as far as 2018, we were deemed trailblazing by offering EV charging points, sustainable heating systems, solar PV, and all these included with the price of the property. So we're providing the future-proofing for the end user, our customers, and they're so intent these days of having all this included. At the end of the day, a developer offering a new home with some or all of these installed will sell better than the developer next door who is waiting for legislation to hit. Design and interiors. So this is where the arguments between the commercial team and the design or sales team can be most eye-watering. The cost of some of the more sustainable interiors can be accused of being prohibitively expensive. But at Galion, through our B Corp journey that we started last spring, we are committed to take a little less for ourselves and put back a little more into the community we serve. And I can tell you, it's a good feeling. Our customers see it and understand it, and they want it. These, again, they're self-explanatory, but to take one, for example, Dulux is a sponsor for an initiative of utilising leftover paint to brighten up underserved community projects, such as care home murals, children's hospices, and food banks. They've all benefited from the scheme. So environment and biodiversity. So obviously many of these, again, now are quite rightly a condition of planning. But don't underestimate how super their impact is on your neighbouring communities and the engagement therein. By way of softening the built environment, where we can, we plant growing whip hedgerows instead of installing closed board fencing. You'll be surprised at the cost saving, but the consumer also generally buy into this approach, understanding the benefits to local wildlife. Where we need to install fencing, we always create a hedgehog corridor to make sure that they can move about nicely. Grasscrete, parking spaces look good with grasscrete, better than tarmac anyway, and create habitats for smaller insects and bugs. And finally, welcome gifts. Rather than the usual bottle of fizz or bunch of flowers, we pack a little hamper full of environmentally beneficial bits and bobs like bee bombs for planting and hedgehog houses for the larger gardens. So, the following set of slides represent a case study of Galion's flagship development in Kent and Mandeville called Lakeview. I thought it might put the rules of thumb into a little context for you. So, Lakeview consented in January 2017. Galion, after the consent was issued, set about developing its team for the construction to start in summer of 2018. The site is an old shallow quarry, so the possibilities for biodiversity net gain and what have you were endless. First, we had to look after our resident newt family. So man-made rockeries and wetland ponds were installed, and in only a few short years, well, you can see the end result, but with careful guidance from our consultant ecologist. There are 4 of these ponds located on the periphery of the site and alongside the natural limestone rockeries. We think they're a beautiful addition to the community we've created. We also set aside a field of well over an acre to create recreational green open space for walkers and picnickers. This includes 18 allotments for residents of the whole village, not just buyers at Lakeview, and this has proved an invaluable link for good community engagement. On top of this, a new village green, again an acre in size, welcomes you at the entrance of the development, all of which we believe offers the lifestyle, especially post-pandemic, and feeling of space we all currently crave. Remember to flick on. So this is one of the biggest homes on the development. There's a hierarchy of homes ranging from 1-bed flats all the way up to this monster. As the site was an old lias quarry, we've used all its own natural stone, hand-cropped on site throughout the scheme. This vastly reduced our carbon footprint, not to mention the reduction in lorry journeys from further afield. We used timber windows and doors to create the traditional and characterful aesthetic we so wanted, but also to add sustainable nature to the build. So in 2018, the first phases of the development included gas-fired central heating systems, but this really jarred with our sense of commitment to the planet. We started the search for an innovative system and stumbled across our friends at Energy Carbon. Rod is over there if you want to chat to him later. Here you can see our MD, Tim Barnes, inspecting the installation. a fantastic system that has proved so popular with the customers who are living in the houses. And once we got over all the purchaser questions and worries, rather like probably when the first microwaves came out, they are really encouraged and really enjoying the comfort that infrared heating brings. Solar, we've put an inline solar garage roof system on this house. This is the front of the last house you saw. Solar's been around for a long time now, so it doesn't really feel innovative, but it's requested by the purchaser and something we can't ignore. This system was chosen for its aesthetics, but also, of course, for its capabilities. I'm sorry? No, I don't believe. Only within the development phase? No, I disagree. No, we didn't. Well, clearly not, because we've installed it. So smart water cylinders are also part of these 3 last homes that we've installed. It's proved most welcome amongst our customers and will do at our latest development in Baltonsborough. The ability to understand your usage and only heat the hot water that you'll need offers a vast energy saving. Although Thomas will disagree with me there, so might have to take that back. But the customers are pleased, and so it's a win-win in our view. Finally, but most importantly, it's good governance. Write beautiful policies. Be kind to your team. And we're all in it together. So lead from the top and truly make a difference for us all to enjoy. Small adjustments to the way we build can really have a lasting impact on us and our future generations. I'd like, if I may, to keep you from the bar for a little longer, just a couple of minutes, to finish with a short film produced in collaboration with 6 other SME developers from around the country. I hope it inspires you, as it does us all at Galion. Thank you.
There's a long list of things to consider when choosing your new home. But how often do you think about the environment and sustainability? Hundreds of thousands of new homes are built in the UK each year, but few are made with environmental and social impact at the very heart of their construction. This has brought about a rapid change to our planet's needs, and with our social and environmental future lying in the balance, we can't afford to get this wrong. Sustainability cannot be an afterthought. It has to be ingrained in our designs and evident in all we do. As a regional home builder, each project is an opportunity for us to shape the future of home building and leave the world a little better than we found it. This is why our suppliers, regardless of their size or scale, are consciously chosen for their belief and commitment to the bigger picture. Together, we put our message in the materials, and the materials where it matters. Our homes are more than just bricks and beams. They're a breath of fresh air, and one step closer to redressing the environmental balance. Our ambition stretches beyond the boundaries of our developments, building better communities, leaving behind a local legacy, supporting schools and charities, and paying local tradesmen for a job well done. Together, we're closing the skills gap, embracing equality, and celebrating culture. addressing outdoor problems with indoor solutions, saving gas, electricity, water, and waste wherever we can. Making homes that are fit for the future through thoughtful design, product development, and extensive research. We're leveraging tomorrow's technology today, because what we do now will be judged by generations to come. In choosing us, you're choosing to make a difference.
Victoria, thank you very much. Really, hopefully that was part of the kind of inspire that we do around what can be done, and really exciting to see. That concludes our presentation for this evening. Thank you very much for your time. I really hope we've hit the nail on the head around education, inform, and inspire. For those of you in Taunton, upstairs, the supplier show is open, and you're very welcome to head up there. The bar is also open, and I look forward to talking to you, lots of you throughout the rest of this evening. Thank you very much once again to all our speakers. We can have a round of applause for them. That would be great.